Negotiations don't just happen in the boardroom. They happen in everyday life. I'm Susie Tomenchok, expert negotiator, author, and TEDx speaker. I'm glad you're here. I'm going to show you the art of negotiation without manipulation so you can level up, know your worth, and adopt a negotiator mindset. Let's go. Hey, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Susie, and I have a really special guest. I'm so excited that she's here. Charlotte Blair. Charlotte, thank you so much for being here. We were reminiscing. We've loosely known each other for a while, but tell people about you. Tell people what you want them to know about what you do for a living.
The first thing to know about me is I'm originally a Brit, but I live now in Australia. I have spent most of my career in sales, probably IT sales. And then I shifted my career about 10 years ago to become a Gallup accredited strengths coach. And I love working with teams and organizations and other coaches around the world to help them discover, use their strengths and live a more purposeful, meaningful life.
Nice. And this is a naive American thing to say, but you know, Australia and England have such similar accents that it made it easy for you to move to Australia.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing. Whenever I come to America and people say, "Where are you from?" And I go, "Where do you think I'm from?" And they go, well, "Either England or Australia." And I go, "Well, you're right, both." They do have similar accents, but probably if you spoke to any British person, or no, if you spoke to any Australian person, they go, "No, she's definitely British." And if you spoke to any British person, they would say, "Yeah, we can hear a bit of Aussie now in there." But interesting enough, the Americans, yes, would often see it similar, probably similar to we might say Canadian and American can sound similar. Whereas you guys would go, no, they're very different. So
good to know that. Good to know the flip side of that. Thank you for sharing that. And so you coach people all around the world. Tell us where you spend most of your time. I'm interested to kind of know who knows you.
Well, I reside here. I work with a couple of big global organizations that have presence all over the place. There may be some organizations, the likes of, Telstra, Inchcape, Transport Acts Commission, who are a little bit more Australian central based, but have pockets all over the place. When we talk about strengths language, Susie, being a high woo, I like to think I know lots of people. So you go, yeah. Who might know me? Well, I'd like to think lots of people would know me. Having spent 12 years at Verizon, who are a big global organization themselves with sort of global presence, I often find myself in lots of different time zones because of that piece about working globally. There's a lot of other coaches that I work with that are, kind of US based. So I'd like to think a number of different people might know me and find me.
Well, one thing that I wanted to really tease out is talking about, I bet you get this question a lot. What are common themes? And you and I were talking about common themes in leadership. And so we were talking and throwing out a couple things. And you said, really being clear in communication and setting expectations. And for me, that's really clear in negotiations. That's the thing that really complicates negotiation is communication. And it's also for leaders around really being clear about what they do. So tell me more about how you answered that and what you hear.
What I hear is a challenge from leaders of, the people in my team are not doing what I expect of them, or the people in my team are coming in late or not meeting goals. And when we unpack it, and Gallup's data proves this, that there's so many people that actually don't know what is expected of them. We think about that kind of Q1 question on Gallup's Q12. It's a foundational question of, at work, I know what's expected of me, but the amount of people that answer that low, they might have a job description, but actually what they are then asked to do is quite wide. And then we have multi-reporting line teams that sometimes where you're clear over here, but you're not clear over here. So when we get down to it, and with leaders, are we being clear back to our people about what we do expect from them? And are we asking the right questions to clarify? And are we asking more open questions or closed questions? But yeah, sort of that clarity of expectations and the conversations that we should be having but are maybe not having. Because one of the other topics is, leaders are constantly very busy. They've got so many things coming at them. They're reporting up and they're reporting down. And a manager and a leader's job is tough. They've got a lot of things coming at them as well as living their own life and balancing their family.
Exactly.
And therefore, sometimes spending the time with the people to get that clarity of expectations. You set somebody a task and then they don't deliver it. Well, because you've assumed that they know what's expected of them. So I think there's a lot of assumptions made in life.
Yeah, so good. Such an important topic. I'd love for us to put a little bit more context and color into it with some stories, but we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. So important that you've identified that it's time, and it's also, was I really clear? I thought I was really clear. Do you have a specific story from a client or even you that you can tell us about to help us really understand some context here?
Yeah, there's a couple that are popping up to me. One is with a whole leadership team that I was working with. And when we were sharing some of their common challenges, we noticed that there was this pattern. Oh yeah, me too. I'm finding that too. And I'm finding that too. And actually, when we looked at, if I tie this back to the work that I do around Clifton Strengths, we tied it back to strengths. We found that this particular team were really high self-assurance. And when we think about the Gallup definition of self-assurance of somebody that's got a good inner compass, very comfortable with the direction that they're going in, that kind of confidence piece. What they were finding is that their team were not necessarily willing to challenge them and push back and ask the questions because they sounded so kind of like confident. Well, I don't want to kind of push back on this person. And it was a bit of an aha moment for them that, well, why are my team not delivering? Why are my team, not even pushing back or required if I ask a question? And this realization that so many of them had this one dominant talent theme, that it took somebody else in the team to say, well, I don't think people question us because of this. And it was an aha moment for them that meant they needed to go back and spend more time building stronger connections with their people, getting to really understand, to ask more of those open questions, the what, why, who, where, how, the tell, explain, describe. That's one at a team level. And then when they did go and ask more questions and clarifying of their team and, ask these questions maybe more one-on-one than in an open forum that they were comfortable with, that changed the game for them. I think another one was I was working with a leader recently who was sharing a frustration with a team member that she had, that the work she would ask her to do would come back and either not delivered on time or was just not right. And I'm so frustrated with this person. And I shared some questions that she could ask her. And she was like, oh, I don't think I'm doing this. I'm assuming she knows what I expect from her. And I'm assuming she knows when I need it by. But she realized she wasn't setting clear deadlines of, I need this back on Friday at 5 p.m. And what it should look like is this. This is what good looks like. But how you do that is down to you. But here's some resources that might be open to you. She was sort of delegating the task, but not delegating all the other sort of aspects of it. And when she realized there was a gap in the questions she was asking and a gap in the information she was providing, she was like, oh, it's more on me than it is on this other person not doing what they said. There's some onus on me here to be clearer about what I need and what I expect and what good looks like and the timescales that we need this back by. When we're vague, it can lead to, vague outcomes.
Yeah, it's so interesting to think about somebody that maybe doesn't know strengths and they don't really understand the context of self-assurance. Somebody with self-assurance uses strong language or comes across really confident so that people are more reluctant to question them because they're so self-assured. And so that's super interesting that as a leader, you might think about, are you welcoming the questioning? And I love also what you said about it is asking the right questions to get people to fill in the blank so you understand, but you have to really listen to what they're saying and spend the time to really understand how it feels to be them on their side. Because even though we feel like we're being really clear, the research shows that so often we're not. So make that assumption. Make the assumption that you need to ask the question and listen to really understand.
I'm connected, and I'd say he's a good friend and a business mentor of mine, really. Oscar Trimboli is a listening expert here in Australia, and he wrote a book on how to listen, and he's written a number of books. He's on a mission to sort of help more people listen more deeply. And he was running a session for our coaching community recently on this. And the bit that really stands out to me there as you were reflecting that back was about this listening for differences or listening for similarities. You know, what are we sort of listening for what we ordinarily know and hear? Yeah. Or are we listening for some differences that we maybe just need to sort of unpack a little bit? And I love this concept. I use this, I guess, tool, call it a tool called the Rule of 3+, that when somebody asks or somebody says something, you say, oh, you know, this is really frustrating. You're picking up on that word of, you know, what's particularly frustrating. And each time you're asking a question that unpacks what's being said a little bit. So, you know, listening and asking can go hand in hand, but are we truly listening for even some of the things that are unsaid? Are we listening for the body language? So again, when those leaders are sort of taking everything that's being thrown at them, are they listening for the differences? Are they listening for the unsaid?
Yeah. And picking like the way you can best listen, a phone call versus a Zoom call, or in person versus a virtual, if you have those opportunities so that you can pick up on those nuances. And, you know, Chris Voss wrote a book. He's a FBI negotiator when there's somebody is taking a hostage negotiator. I couldn't think of the word. And he said they commonly have 7 people on the line listening and all listening for different things. So I love what you said about his research, his listening research. But also when you think about that, wow, there's that many nuances in a conversation. So as a leader, you better be curious because there's a lot of things that you could be listening for. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. And again, instead of making the assumption that we know what somebody says, like I always love the example of when people say, oh, close a business. Can I have that by close a business? Well, close a business to me in Australia is going to be different to close a business to you in America, or, you know, you've got somebody that works part-time. So even just that tiny example of close a business, we often just let that go and assume that, oh, okay, yeah, it's my close of business. But are we then unpacking that a little bit of, well, hang on, when you say close a business, what do you mean by that? Yeah. I mean 5 p.m. on a Friday or 4 p.m. on a Friday. You might mean something different.
As leaders, we could get for 1 week, why don't you think about how clear you're being about everything? So question everything. When you say close a business, say, what does that mean to you? And get really curious and start to really understand that everything that you said around may not be as clear as you believe if you do have an eye for curiosity.
I think is my favorite question when we're doing leadership training and we're helping leaders become better coaches and asking better questions. I always go, what is your best friend? Versus why? Because, you know, why can sometimes come across a little bit challenging and accusing, even though that's not our intention. Others, you know, why are you doing it that way? Can, you know, make somebody respond. Whereas, you know, gosh, you know, what's the next steps that you're doing there? What are you finding is useful in here? You know, what can be used to really unpack things?
Yeah.
Versus the did you, have you, should you, would you, you know, are those closed questions that can, you know, narrow us down. And sometimes we want to narrow things down, but getting curious, what is such an amazing understated question?
Oh, that is so good. What is the question, or your friend? I love how you said that. So when we come back, Charlotte, I want you to give us some more tips. This is like gold already. The what question is so good. So when we come back, 3 tips from Charlotte before we go. I always say that as an executive coach, I love that people listen to a podcast, but I always like it when people have actionable steps that they can put in place, because that's what executive coaches want. They want to see action. So Charlotte, I know you agree with me with that sentiment there. I'd love to hear your 3 tips that you give to people when they're really considering as a leader, how do they make sure their communication is clear?
Well, we picked up on, previously we were chatting about this what. I go, use what at least 3 times. Again, this comes into that, rule of 3 plus. Don't stop at one question.
Mm-hmm.
Keep asking something 3 times. So listening to what somebody's saying, taking one of those words, unpacking it more. By close of business on Friday. What do you mean by close of business on Friday? Well, kind of 5 p.m. What might get in the way of you being able to do that by 5 p.m.? Well, I guess I might have another report. What's an action that you could take to mitigate that? So using what 3 times is a powerful one. I think that's my first tip. Second tip is I love like lots of little tools and frameworks that are helpful. Like if we've got a little tool kit and a tool bag, we can reach in and grab a couple of different things. I like having different ones. Another one that I really love is called Seaport. And I think this is good when it comes down to delegation. So when we are delegating something, the C stands for context. Have we given the context about what it is that we're doing? A little bit of the kind of history. The P in Seaport stands for purpose. Again, the why behind it. What's the intention? Why are we doing this particular thing? The O stands for outcome. What's the outcome that we hope to get at the end? What does good look like? R stands for resources. So the people that we might need, the tools, the systems. Have we been clear about what's open to them, for instance? And then the T is time. So when do we expect it by? How long do we think it might take them? What else might get in the way? How often do they want us to kind of check in with them to see how they're going? Okay, I'll check in with you tomorrow. So when we're thinking about, Seaport, context, purpose, outcome, resources, time, that's my other favorite kind of tip and tool. I guess my next tip might be, have you discovered your own talents and strengths? That the things that might be getting in the way of your own listening and questioning. I'm high communication. I can talk too much sometimes. So therefore, I'm not giving somebody else an opportunity to respond. So if you haven't discovered your strengths, a tip might be discover them. If you have discovered your strengths, with Susie already or somebody else, then dig your report back out again and reflect and think about how your strengths could be helping you more and how they might be getting in the way of really sort of listening and being clear on those expectations. They would be my 3 tips. Susie?
Oh, that's so good. I've never thought about what I've heard and I talk about, but saying it 3 times to really unpack it. And the way you illustrated that doesn't make it feel like you're just pounding the questions, but just do it in a really natural way. And I had to write down the framework. I love that because people always talk about the best way to delegate, and the best way to delegate is to be really clear. So that's super helpful.
Often when we delegate, we forget to delegate one of those steps. So we might have given the outcome and the resources and the purpose, but actually we haven't checked in about the time. We haven't said when we need it by or how often they want to be checked in. So we often see that people do some of this, but there's one bit and it falls down because one of those steps were missed. And it's such a simple framework to stick on a pinboard in front of you and remind yourself of, have I done this, and this?
And it reminds me too that it's all okay to say when you're delegating, listen, my high responsibility, so this goes to your last one, is I need to know where you are in that. So you need to check in with me every Wednesday and let me know the status, because that will help me just understand where you are in that. So understanding who you are and the strengths that you have and how they might be getting in your way of being a really clear communicator. So powerful. Yep. And what do you think is the one thing that people see their shift when you're really intentional about clear communication? You're building this trust with this other person. That's such an important thing in expanding your communication, because when you do have to have difficult conversations, you really need to make sure that somebody is doing what they need to do. you have to have that trusted relationship. So all these lead to that investment in the relationship. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. And as you were saying, as you were talking there, what was popping up for me was that sort of David Meister's trust equation. And this piece about low self-focus. It's get curious about that other person, that other human that you're working with. How do we get to know them on a human level, a personal level? We were talking earlier about similarities and differences. Where are we maybe similar? Where have we got a connection? So that, yes, when you need to go and have a difficult conversation, you've already got trust built with that person. I always love, Stephen, the tool in my toolkit is thinking about that Stephen Covey, emotional bank balance. We have to build up the bank balance, the emotional balance first, so that we're not continuously making withdrawals and that we're in deficit. So how are we connecting with people? And again, when we're a busy leader, it's hard to go, I've got to find the time to connect with my people. Yeah. But it makes such a big difference to get to understand that other human that you're working with, of what are they into? Have they got kids? Have they got family? Have they got pets? What's their sporting team? And it doesn't need to be, huge, but just being focused on them, the other person, builds trust.
Leadership is a long game for sure. Such great tips. And when we come back, we'll tell people how to connect with you and also where to find these notes so that they can put these tips in action. We'll be right back. Oh my gosh, Charlotte, such great advice. And I have so many emails I need to write to some of my clients to give them these key tips. Charlotte, tell people where they can find you.
Best two places to find me would be on LinkedIn, and I am an open connector. I'm always happy to accept an invite from somebody unless they're trying to immediately sell me something. But yeah, LinkedIn, best place, Charlotte Blair. Second best place would be my website, the charlotteblair.com.au. Will direct them, regardless of whether they are a leader or a corporate interested in strengths, or another coach interested in what I do there. It will sort of direct and funnel them off. And then if there's somebody that's stuck in their career, then the book Career Unstuck, it will point them to that direction as well. So
we didn't talk about your book, Career Unstuck. Look for that as well. It's a great read, and you have such a wealth of knowledge. And I do have to point out, I've known Charlotte for a long time, and she truly is a giver. She really does like to invest in people. So reach out to her, find out more about her. Really be connected to her, because you will benefit. I guarantee it. Thank you so much, Charlotte. This was so beneficial.
You're more than welcome. Thank you very much for asking me.
And don't forget, I want to tell you, negotiation is more than a skill. It's a mindset. So it's all about that. So thank you so much. We'll see you next time.